Hey, let's go! We live? Hi! In this video, you'll learn how to use FACEIT and create animated faces like me. Yo, where is my body? We'll cover body rigs in the next video. I see. Okay, cool. FACEIT simplifies the process of creating shape keys and applying facial motion capture to your character. My goal in this series of videos is to cover the most common questions that people have about the add-on. Some people want to use it with Rigify, others with AutoRig Pro, and so on. And you may be interested in a variety of character styles, realistic, anime, or cartoony. And we'll cover all of these specific cases in the upcoming videos. But this first tutorial will give you a detailed overview of most of the features of the add-on. So please watch it until the end because it will make following the next videos much easier. You can get FACEIT for $99 on the Blender market. So it's an expensive add-on, especially by Blender standards. If you don't have the add-on yet, you're probably wondering if it's worth it. The main benefit of FACEIT is that it can save you a lot of time and frustration when dealing with facial animation and mocap in Blender. So I can easily recommend it to artists and studios that need these features. I hope my videos help you understand what the add-on does and if it's right for you. Keep in mind that my tutorials are focused on version 2 of the add-on, not 1.6. You may be able to follow along with 1.6 to some extent, but I cannot guarantee it. Before we go into the nitty-gritty of FACEIT, let's try to understand the underlying technology and workflows that it is based on. I think this is important because many people tend to approach an add-on as a magic box, if you will. So in the case of FACEIT, you may approach it as if it is a magic tool that is supposed to make facial animation for you. And FACEIT will try to do that, but you may encounter problems that you don't know how to solve. It will just be so much simpler if you approach the add-on with understanding. First of all, it's important to understand that FACEIT facial animation is based on shape keys rather than bone deformations. So right away, if you have a bone rig, such as a Rigify face rig or AutoRig Pro face rig, and you hope that FACEIT will animate that, then that would be a mistaken expectation. But for now, let's see what shape keys are and how they are used in facial animation. That may be very basic for some of you, but I don't want to make any assumptions and I want to make sure that even beginners can understand what is going on. So here we have a cube. And as you probably know, if you go to edit mode, you can edit the vertices and polygons of this mesh. Now I'll go back to object mode and I'll go to the object data properties. And in here you should see the list of shape keys, which is currently empty. So if I press the plus button, that will create the basis shape key. And then we can create variations of the position of the vertices of this object. So I'm going to add another shape key and then go to edit mode and just select some vertices and move them around. And then if I go back to object mode, the cube will snap back to its original cube position. Now, if I increase the value of this shape key, you'll see that the cube takes the shape that I just created in edit mode. And something that is interesting about shape keys is that I can actually push them past the shape that I established. So if I increase my max range to 2, I'll be able to push this shape farther than the shape that I created. And if I set the minimum range to -1, I can actually push it in the opposite direction. So these are the basics of shape keys. Let's look at a slightly more realistic example. Here I have an actual face and I already have a basis shape key. Let's delete it and create it anew. And then I'm going to create a second one. And let's call this one smile. So again, you can go to edit mode. And with a complex mesh like that, you'll probably want to switch on proportional editing, for example, and move these vertices to create a smile. And of course, another way is to go to sculpt mode and sculpt the expression in a more intuitive way. So this way of creating shape keys is quite good, but some poses may be difficult to establish. So if you already have a face rig on the model, that can be used to create shape keys. So here is an example of the same head, but rigged with a simple Rigify face rig. If I wanted to create shape keys using my rig, I can select the mesh and create the basis shape key, and then go to the rig pose mode. And let's say I can create the mouth open pose. Then I'll go back to object mode, select the mesh, go to the modifiers, and in the armature modifier, I'm going to expand the advanced options and choose save as shape key. So once you click this, you can go to the object data properties again, and you'll see that a new shape key was created. So if I go to pose mode, select all controls and just clear all transforms, and then enable this shape key, you'll see that it's actually the mouth open pose that we just created. So I could create a smile in the same way. And then I'll have two shape keys to play with. I'll have the mouth open and smile. Okay, so you can see that this is already quite efficient, but I think you'll see that FACEIT is even more efficient. There is no going back and forth between rig and mesh. So FACEIT works with shape keys, and in particular, it uses the popular ARKit set of facial expressions. FACEIT version 2 also supports other formats, such as audio to face and even custom shape key sets. But the ARKit shapes are the most widely used ones because they are easy to use and produce great results. ARKit is a technology from Apple for the iPhone, and it deals with much more than just facial expressions. But for our purposes, we can ignore everything else and just focus on the facial tracking features. So there are a lot of apps on the Apple's App Store that can do facial capture, and they are all based on the same ARKit technology. But what if you have an Android phone, or if you want to use your webcam? Until recently, there was almost no solution for non-Apple devices. The problem is that ARKit makes use of the depth sensor of the camera on the iPhone, which is Apple's proprietary technology. But now there is an app called Hallway, which basically captures the same ARKit expressions, but with any camera that you like. So even if you don't own an iPhone, there are alternative solutions out there. And now, how do ARKit and shape keys in Blender connect together? So this is just a big picture view of what is happening. We'll talk about the specifics later, but in a nutshell, ARKit detects facial expressions, and conveniently, it reduces them to a number between 0 and 1. So if you could just create the same 52 expressions as shape keys, we can then plug these numbers that we get from ARKit face tracking into the shape keys. So if ARKit detects a smile of 0.5, we'll have a half smile, and if it's a full smile, that will set our shape key value to 1, and we'll see the full smile on our character. And when you put these 52 expressions changing in real time, you get a facial performance. So the process is you have to prepare the shape keys, and you can do it manually, or you can let FACEIT do the heavy lifting for you. I'll show you how to do it in a second. And the second part is to record your face, and then ARKit will analyze it, and it will output data that you can then retarget to your actual character. And this retargeting process can be complicated. It can be done without an add-on to some extent, but FACEIT has a lot of awesome tools specifically for applying the motion capture data onto a character. Let's install FACEIT quickly. Go to your Blender Market downloads and download the latest version of FACEIT. It's a zip file and you should not unzip it. Just keep it as it is and then go to Blender, go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, click Install, navigate to your FACEIT zip file, highlight the add-on and click Install Add-on. Place a check mark next to the add-on's name And then FACEIT will be in your 3D view in the side panel under the FACEIT tab. So for this video, I'll be using this model here, and I understand that you are interested in more real world scenarios, such as having a full body character with a full body rig, and I'm going to show such examples in the next video. In this video, I mainly want to show you the full FACEIT workflow, and I want to cover as many of the features of the add-on as possible. And this model here will allow me to do just that. So there is a simple rig on this guy, just something to move the face. And it's a very simple rig. There is no face rig, but you can also practice on a completely unrigged model. So we are going to start with the setup, but before that, let's quickly explore these buttons here. By default, the workspace is set to all, and so you're going to see all of the FACEIT tabs here. So setup, rig, expressions, bake, shapes, control, and mocap. You can choose rig, and that will just limit the tabs to the 4 that have to do with rigging. Or you can choose mocap, and that will give you the 4 tabs that have to do with mocap. Personally, I just keep this setting to all, and it works well for me. So let's set up this character. This face model is split into 3 objects. So this main object contains almost everything, including teeth and eyes and eyelashes as well. And I've just split the beard and the eyebrows as a separate object because they are made of hair cards and they can be a little bit hard to select. And I'm making my life a little bit easier by having these hair objects as separate meshes. But this main mesh is complex enough, and it will be a good example of setting up a complex face with FACEIT. The first step in the process is to register our face objects. So we just have to select everything that has to do with the face and press the Register Face Objects button. Technically, the rig shouldn't be included, but FACEIT will only register mesh objects anyway, so you don't have to worry about it. I'll click on the button, and you'll see that I have the 3 mesh objects registered here. You'll notice that I have an existing rig, so FACEIT detected that I have a rig on this model, and it filled out this field for me. If you don't have a rig, then this field will be empty, but the process will be the same. There is a special case of having a Rigify face rig on your model, and that would allow you to skip the entire rigging process, but we are going to explore this in the next video. And now we are going to start assigning these vertex groups. And so this setup takes a little bit of time, but it allows the add-on to rig very complex faces. The first group that we have to assign is the main group, and that is the most important group and actually the only one that is mandatory. So the main group is basically the face and any geometry that is directly connected to it. So I'm going to select the main mesh and go to edit mode. And the easiest way to select the face and everything that is connected to it is to place your mouse over the face and press the L button. And if there was a full body with arms and legs, then that will be selected, and that is okay. That is exactly what you want. So once you have a selection, you simply click on the main button. Next, we have to assign the eyes. And so zoom in and deselect everything. Actually, I can undo and just press H to hide this geometry. And now I can focus on the eyes. The left eyeball and right eyeball groups help FACEIT figure out the pivot point of rotation of the eye. And that is very important. So because this eye is quite spherical, it is actually made of a couple of meshes like this main eyeball and some iris and cornea meshes. So because the whole thing is fairly spherical, I can probably select all of these meshes and assign them as left eyeball. But for this demonstration, I'm going to select this part of the eye, the white part, and assign it as left eyeball. And then hide it. And also, with L, select the right eye and assign it as right eyeball. And hide it. Then I can enable X-ray and select some vertices from these meshes here. Being careful not to select anything behind it. And then press Ctrl L, and that will complete the selection. And then I can assign it as other left. and the same on the other side. So that is other right. This turban here kind of gets in the way, so let's just select it with L. And I'm going to assign it as a rigid part. Next we have eyelashes. So you can just box select over them on both sides. And then press Ctrl L and zoom in to make sure that you got everything. So I'm going to shift and box select over these parts that I haven't selected, and then Ctrl L. And also here. Okay, then you can move them around to make sure that everything is selected and right click to cancel. And now I'm going to assign them as eyelashes and hide them. Now these tear ducts here, you can actually leave unassigned. When they're special objects like this, you can leave them unassigned and FACEIT will figure out what to do with them. These earrings also need to be a rigid part, and here I should explain the assign method. Currently we are in replace mode, which means that if I assign this as rigid now, the turban that I assigned previously will be removed and this geometry will be assigned instead. So we don't want that, but what we want is to add this geometry to the group. So I'll switch to add mode and press rigid. Okay, then we can move on with the teeth and tongue, but before that, I'm going to go to object mode and select this beard and assign it as facial hair, and also the brows, and also assign them as facial hair. If they were part of the main mesh, we could assign them, of course, but we would have to go to edit mode and manually select all of these polygons, making sure that we don't select other vertices. So that is why I kept them as a separate mesh, and that makes it a little bit faster and easier for me. So now I can hide these meshes to be able to focus on the mouth. So I'll go to edit mode again for the main mesh. And now I want to select the upper teeth. Now here the teeth are separate meshes, so I can place the mouse over a teeth and press L and keep doing that. And I don't want to select the gums yet. So keep selecting the upper teeth. Maybe I should disable X-ray. If I press Shift and L over this lower teeth, I can deselect it. So those are upper teeth, and I'm going to assign them as upper teeth and hide them. And I also want to add the gums, the upper part of the gums, to upper teeth. So I'll enable X-ray again and just box select over these parts, or you can use C for circle select and just select this upper part of the gums. And since I'm in add mode, now I can press upper teeth and these vertices will be added to the selection. So I can press H to hide them. Maybe this part as well, I'm going to add as upper teeth. Next, I'm going to select the tongue vertices. Just select one vertex and press Ctrl and plus on the numpad to keep expanding. And then I can again use circle selection to finish selecting the tongue. You don't have to be very, very precise. FACEIT will smooth the weighting later on. So I'll assign this as tongue and press H to hide. And then I can select all of this geometry, press Ctrl L to complete the selection and assign as lower teeth. And now I'm done assigning, so I can press Alt H to unhide everything. And I can check my results with this button here. And there is a problem with the main group, it seems. And this can happen if there are unconnected vertices in the main group. So if I go to edit mode for this object, if I select this whole face mesh, and let's say that I also select a vertex from the eyelashes and assign it as a main mesh, that will be a problem. So let's go to object mode and press the X button to reset the main group. Then I'll go back to edit mode, deselect everything, and again with L select all connected vertices, and then press on the main group. Go to object mode and check my geometry again, and now this warning will disappear. So that ends the setup process. If you want to check your vertex groups, you can click this button and click this vertex group, for example, and that will put you in edit mode and the left eyeball will be selected. Or I can select the meshes that I assigned as rigid and see if they are all selected. And I can see that actually I need to add this other earring to the selection. So I'll select it with L and in add mode, add it as a rigid mesh. Okay, so it pays off to really take your time in this process and set things up correctly. But now we are done and we can move on to the rig section. So now we have to generate the so-called landmarks. You'll see that in a second. If your character is asymmetrical, you can click the asymmetry button. But I'm going to disable it because this character is symmetrical. And this button is also very important. If I click on it, that will only leave me with the main mesh, so the vertices that I assigned as main. So now I'm going to click on generate landmarks, and that will display this mask. These are the landmarks. So first I want to align it with the chin of the character. Next, I'm going to align the height and the width. And this won't be perfect, but that's okay, because now you can move the individual points of this mask. And these dots have to be aligned on the main face mesh and not on top of the beard and so on. And that is why I use this mask here. I can remove it, but I'm going to enable it again because I want to project these points onto the actual face. So let's start with the chin. It is actually aligned already. This is the bottom of the chin. And this is the chin line. So you should place this point where the chin ends. And this one in the middle, and this one will actually align properly later, but it has to be a little bit below. These points, just place them on each side of the chin. This I place on the side of the jaw, and this can be placed below the ear. So next we'll move to the mouth, and that is a little bit special. You want to place this mouth corner a little bit outside of the actual mouth of the character. And these other dots you can place inside of the actual lip, not on the edge of the lip, but inside it. So something like this. This dot, something like this. It will control the cheeks. This is the bottom of the nose. This is the tip of the nose. And these dots you place on the nostrils. This dot will become another controller, so place it where you want your controller to appear, somewhere below the eye. Then the eyes, similar to the mouth, you can place the corners a little bit outside of the actual eye. And the remaining points you just align with the upper eyelid and lower eyelid. This line will separate the eye from the eyebrow. So I'm going to squash it a little bit and place it just above the eye. The eyebrow points I'll align with the eyebrow. This point you kind of want to the side of the edge of the eye. This can be placed above the ear. And these points here define the end of the forehead. So you can place them something like this. And this is looking good. So the next step is to press project landmarks. So next we want to make sure that all of these dots are also well aligned in perspective view. I'm going to enable this mask again so that I only see the face. And so from the side view, this point can be a little bit higher actually. This point is looking good. Do not put it too low on the neck, or the face may start affecting the neck. So something like this. These points you may have to adjust a little bit and align them with the jawline. Make sure that this is the actual tip of the nose and the side of the nostrils, bottom of the nose. So this is looking good now. And here is a very important and special step. Disable the snap option. And then you can grab the edges of the mouth and push them a little bit beneath the skin. And also from the side view, you can grab the lips and also push them a little bit below the surface of the lip. And this will create nicer deformations of the lips once the rig is generated and assigned to the mesh. And we'll do the same for the eyelids. Just push the edges slightly beneath the skin. Once you're happy with the placement, you can actually generate the FACEIT rig. Before we do, let's just explore some settings that we haven't looked at. The vertex size setting will make these dots a little bit bigger for you and then reset the default size for your Blender installation. And these helpers can be useful when rigging non-standard or non-spherical eyes, such as anime eyes, and we'll explore this in a future video. For now, we'll leave them alone. So now I can generate the FACEIT rig, and then I just need to press the bind button, and I get a menu. So there are some advanced options, which I personally never touch because the defaults are quite good. So I'll just press OK. And now if I go to pose mode, I have this rig, and it actually works. You see that the tongue is working, these teeth meshes can be moved. The mouth opens quite well. Yeah, we're getting a very nice shape. Even the eye works out of the box. And if you've used default Rigify, you know that this is quite an accomplishment. Usually you would have to do a lot of weight painting to get to this kind of quality. But FACEIT automates all of this. The only price that we are paying is the time that we took in the setup section. But once you get used to it, the whole process is actually quite fast. So FACEIT is saving you a lot of time this way. So I'll select everything and clear all transforms. And we can move on. This may be a good point to mention that for the most part, the FACEIT process is non-destructive. So for example, here I can go back to landmarks. If I found that my rigging wasn't exactly what I expected, I can go back to the landmarks and I can keep my existing weights or get rid of them. So I can still work on the dots. I can even go back to the setup if I want to set things up differently. And then I can generate my rig again, bind it again, and so on. And this non-destructiveness is true for the entire process, with some small exceptions, but I'm going to mention them explicitly. So we can move on to the next part of the process, expressions. So here we are going to load some of the default FACEIT expressions. You can add your own custom expressions, which is something quite advanced. We may talk about it in a future video. So I'll press this load button. And here I can choose what kind of expressions I want to add to the character. So the default one is ARKit, and that is what we are going to be working with. Another very interesting one is audio to face. We may cover it in a future video. Then there are some special tongue expressions or poses and phonemes. But as I said, we'll stick to ARKit here. The method is also important. Right now we don't have any expressions, so it doesn't matter. But for example, if you want to have ARKit and audio to face expressions, then you would add ARKit. Here are the expressions, and then click load again. Make sure that you're in append mode and also select audio to face. Now I'm not going to do this here. And these remaining buttons help you rig characters with different proportions. The defaults work quite well, so we're not going to be touching these settings. So now FACEIT loaded up these ARKit poses, and they represent the 52 ARKit shape keys. So the next step is to go through these shape keys and make sure that they look good. But as I do this, I notice that something is wrong with this earring. So I may have made a mistake in the setup section, and I wasn't planning this, but this will allow me to show the non-destructive workflow again. I can go back to the setup and show the vertex group assignments, and I'll start selecting these groups, trying to find where the earring is assigned, and it seems to be the FACEIT left other. Okay, so I'm going to press X to reset this group and then assign it again. So all I have to do is to deselect this earring, and in replace mode, I'm going to press other left again. And then I'll go back to the rig section, object mode, click bind, OK. And that will fix the earring, and then I can go back to the expressions and keep working. Now we have to work on the expressions, but FACEIT has already done like 90% of the job for us. But the process that you need to follow is to click on each shape and make sure that it looks good. So this is eye blink left. And so how do I know if it looks good or not? Well, there is a guide from Apple. I'm going to share this link with you, and it contains a graphic for each shape key. So for example, we want the eye blink left. If I click on this link, it will show me which part of the mesh should be affected and what the shape key should look like. As the name suggests, it's just the left eye being closed. So this is almost good, but the eye is a little bit open, so I can go to pose mode for my rig and just push this control a little bit lower. There is a little part of the eyelid that is not perfect, and that has to do with the weight painting. FACEIT did a good job, but there are very slight imperfections. So I can push this other controller, and if I still find that something is not quite right, I can go to object mode, select my mesh, and here press this sculpt icon. And that will place me in sculpt mode, and I can just start sculpting my mesh. Once I'm happy with the result, I can go to object mode and back to FACEIT. And because blink left has a symmetrical opposite, I can press this symmetry button, and that will symmetrize everything I did on the left side on the right side. So again, that can be a huge time saver. So that is the main process. You tweak the rig controls to establish a good basic shape. Then if you need to, you sculpt by selecting the mesh and clicking on the sculpt icon. And then you mirror the shape if it's a symmetrical one. Another cool feature is the amplify button. So for example, if I look for the jaw open shape, it is looking quite good, but if the mouth wasn't open wide enough, I could press this button and set it to a higher value. Now this will get a little bit ridiculous, so I'm going to undo, and actually I may want to decrease this. So instead of 1, I'll set it to 0.9, and that will close the mouth slightly. So that is the process of setting up your shape keys. You just have to go through each one by one, and use this guide to make sure that your shape keys look what they should look like. And for the most part, FACEIT has already done the work for you. You just need to tweak little things here and there. But that is still important. But there is one shape that needs a special attention, and that is the mouth close shape. So if I enable it, you'll see that it looks quite strange. Especially if I isolate the face, you'll see that it looks like the jaw is open, but the lips are moved up so that the mouth is closed. And this looks very strange, but it is exactly what it needs to be. This shape is never used on its own. It is combined with other shapes to create special facial expressions, but you don't have to worry about it. That happens automatically. And once we bake this shape, it will look even weirder, and I'm going to show it to you again in the next step. So speaking of baking, let's go to the bake section, which is the next step in the process. In the bake section, you can take these expressions that we created using the rig. So let me go out of local mode, and you can bake them down to shape keys. In the beginning, I said that FACEIT works with shape keys. So this process of rigging the character was mainly so that we can create the shape keys easily. If you're following the standard FACEIT workflow, all you have to do is click this button and click OK, and that's it. However, since I want this video to cover as much as possible, let me try to explain what is happening here. So here you have a list of all of the objects that will be baked. These are the same objects that we registered here in setup. And if you click on each of them, you'll see the modifiers that they have. So those will be the same modifiers that you have in the modifier tab. This monitor icon simply enables or disables the respective modifier. So it's the same as clicking this icon here. And the checkbox is very important. That defines which modifiers will be used for the baking process. So the two armature modifiers are, the first one is my base rig that I had from the beginning, and the second one is the face rig that FACEIT added. And for the baking, FACEIT will just use its own armature. So if you had any additional modifiers, such as a corrective smooth corrective is a very useful modifier for rigging. It's almost magical. And so if I wanted to use this modifier for baking, I'll have to put a check mark on it. In this case, I'm going to delete it. And by the way, because this modifier is so useful, FACEIT actually has a special operator to add this. If I go to rig, other modifiers, there is smooth corrective. And if I just click on it, it will be added and it has a special naming. And so if I go to bake now, it will be enabled by default. Here, I'm going to delete the modifier, but I hope the workflow was clear. If you have any additional modifiers and you want the baking process to take them into account, you have to tick this checkbox. But in general, just clicking on this button and then OK will work just fine. Before you bake, you can go to Shapekey utilities and make sure that dynamic shape key ranges is enabled. So this should be enabled by default and it's very useful. You should keep it on. And I'll show you what it does in a second. Under rig utils, you can actually take this bone rig that was created by FACEIT and attach it to your body rig. And this is just an optional tool in FACEIT. It's not part of the main workflow and it is semi-destructive. So I'm going to come back to it at the end of the video. Under other utilities, you have the option to apply modifiers with shape keys. Blender has trouble applying modifiers when they're shape keys, and they're separate add-ons just for that. But here you have it right in FACEIT. You can also apply all shape keys, so that will just take the current deformation of your character and apply it, and that will become the default of your characters. So these are destructive utilities. They are just there if you need them. There are some cleanup operators that we may explore in another video. They're just meant to remove some unnecessary data from your scene, and ideally you should do that at the end when everything is completely set up. So make sure that dynamic shape key ranges is enabled, and then we can press bake shape keys. These three options determine what will happen to the bake modifier. So all of the modifiers that have the checkbox, do you want to keep them active, hide them, which means to disable this monitor icon, or you can also remove them. I'll stick to the default. Then under action, FACEIT can create a little test action, and that will let you preview your shape keys. So I'll stick to the default. Initialize ARKit shapes. This is also highly recommended for the default workflow. It will set up your character to receive motion capture. Keep FACEIT rig active. So we can keep the bone rig active if we wanted to. This is not necessary for the default FACEIT workflow, but it won't cause any issues either. So I'm going to enable it. And disable auto keying. So auto keying was on for the previous part of the workflow, but from here on it's better to disable it. So I'll stick with the default and press OK. So that was the baking process. Now if we scrub through the timeline, you'll see the character going through the same expressions that we created with the bone rig, but these are now actual shape keys. If I select the character and go to Object Data Properties, you'll see that we have all of these shape keys here. If you play with them, you will see them take effect in the viewport. Notice that after we bake the shape keys, FACEIT displays this back to rigging button. So this is the non-destructive workflow again. Even though we bake the shapes, we can always go back to the rig and tweak the expressions if we needed to. Next, we'll move to shapes. And here, if you're following the standard workflow, there isn't much to do. There are some special tools that you can use for special workflows, such as renaming shape keys and so on. But the main thing that you can do here is that you can amplify your shape keys. So for example, if I click on my blink and if I decide that it's not strong enough, I can increase it in here. So that's not what I want here. So I'm going to reset it back to 1, but it is possible to tweak your shape keys here. So here I kind of want to show you another funny shape, which is the tongue out shape. You see that the tongue is kind of poking through the face mesh, and that is again not wrong. However, the shape is not ideal. So let's use the non-destructive workflow again. I can go back to bake and back to rigging and then back to expressions. And I want to work on the tongue out shape. So I can go to pose mode and tweak this tongue so that it's coming out through the middle of the lips and maybe a little bit more. Something like this. And then I'll go back to bake shape keys, okay. And then my tongue out shape will be fixed. And if I want to amplify it here, I can do it. So I wanted to show you the mouth close shape, which can be a little bit weird. So in here, it actually looks the same as in the rigging process or the expression process. And that is because FACEIT set things up for us. But if I go to object mode and select this face, and if I find the mouth close pose, you'll see that the jaw open is also enabled. So if we disable this, you'll see that mouth close just looks as if the lower lip is covering the upper lip. And again, this is normal. It looks weird, but this enables ARKit to create certain mouth expressions, so it's not something that you have to worry about it. Now we can move on to control. And this will create a control rig that manipulates the shapes. And that can be very nice because if you wanted to animate your characters by animating these sliders here, that can be very tedious, almost impossible. So if I just click generate control rig and I can use the default settings and press OK, that will create this very intuitive rig. If I go to pose mode, I can grab any of these controls and, for example, intuitively open the mouth, create a smile, move the mouth, close the eyes, manipulate the eyebrows, and so on. So creating this rig is kind of optional. If you're only going to be working with Mocap, you don't need it, but I would highly recommend it because that will allow you to make edits to your Mocap. Mocap is nice, but it's not always perfect. So having this rig is a great addition. And you can even create manual animation if you needed to. So a little problem right now is that this control rig and the body rig are separate. So if I move the head, the control rig is not moving with it. So if you go to control rig setup, experimental, you can make the control rig follow a bone from another rig. So if I go to pose mode here and select my head control, I can just click the set child of button. And now the control rig will be moving with the base rig. Now, if I want to switch to the face rig, I have to go to object mode and then go to this one and go to pose mode. So if you disable lock object modes, you'll be able to switch between these two without going between the modes. So here I'm rotating the head, here I'm opening the mouth, I can go back to the head, back to the face, and so on. One of the most common questions that I saw about FACEIT is how do I connect it to Rigify or how do I connect it to AutoRig Pro? And in the next video, I'm going to show specific examples, but this is actually it. It doesn't matter what kind of rig you have, you just go through this process that I just showed, and then you connect this FACEIT control rig to the head of the body rig. Anyway, we'll have examples about that. And now we can actually move on to the final step in this process, which is Mocap. And in this video, I'm not going to go into detail about Mocap. The video is already around 40 minutes long and explaining all about the different apps that you have for Mocap and how to then apply the Mocap here may take another 40 minutes. So there will be another video dedicated to just working with Mocap. But in general, FACEIT will allow you to import recorded Mocap, and the apps that it can work with are FaceCap, Live Link Face, and Audio to Face. Now here I'm going to show you an example with FaceCap because that's what I've been using, but actually LiveLink Face is a free app and the technology is exactly the same. So I would actually recommend that you try LiveLink Face first. We also have options for going live. So you can use one of these apps and you can see the avatar performing your actions in real time. So that can be great for VTubers and other people who need a live avatar performance. Under other tools, we have a couple of utilities. Retargeting using FBX can also be useful because some apps output an FBX file. Again, we are going to go into detail in an upcoming video, but in this video, I'm actually going to do the head setup. And that will allow me to also import the head movement that I recorded using FaceCap. I need to set up the head object, so I need to select the armature and then the head bone. In this rig, the head bone is my head control, so I'm going to select it, and then I can go to FaceCap. I'm just going to give you the absolute basics of working with a FaceCap. It's quite easy. You just start the app, and you can basically just press record, point the camera at your face, and do your performance. Once you're done, you stop recording and you click the export button. That will save some files that you can find in your files in a folder called FaceCap. And you have to send that data somehow to your computer. Once you have it, you can click load audio and just load your audio and load text file and choose it. Then just import text and I can use the default settings and click OK. And just like that, this character will be playing my facial performance, including head rotation. And I'm going to play a render of the result now. Hey, enjoying the FACEIT tutorial videos? Maybe you should like and subscribe? Why not? I show the render because Blender's viewport will not play this animation in 30 FPS with a material preview. But I can recommend that you switch your playback options to sync to audio and also enable scrubbing. And that can help you see the performance a little bit better in the viewport, even if it's not playing at full speed. But if you really want to see it in real time, you'll have to do a quick viewport render. Okay, more about that in upcoming videos. And we are almost done with this demonstration of the full FACEIT workflow. The last thing that I'm going to show you is how you can join the bone rig that FACEIT created earlier with your existing rig, including all the weights and so on. So the bone rig is over here. It's called FACEIT rig, and FACEIT hides it. To unhide it, I have to go to the filters and enable the viewport display. I'm not sure why this is not enabled by default in Blender, and just unhide the FACEIT rig. Then I can go to bake, rig utils, and here FACEIT will try to set things up for you automatically. If it's not set up, you may have to point to the FACEIT face rig and also to your body rig, and also specify which bone is the head bone in your existing rig. Then you just have to be in object mode and click on join to body and keep the default settings. So it says that the operation is destructive, but if you keep these default settings, it is only semi-destructive. You'll actually still be able to go back to expressions and use the bone rig to create the expressions and then bake them. So I'm going to click OK. And you'll see that now my body rig or the head rig and the face rig are joined into one single armature. If I go to pose mode, you'll see that the rig works. One thing that doesn't work is any meshes that we set is rigid in the setup phase. So here, anything that we set is rigid will not work. The developer is aware of this, and in the future there probably will be a fix. For now, what you can do is just go to object mode, select the object, go to edit mode, press L to select these rigid objects, so the earrings as well. And then here in the vertex groups, I'm going to look for the head, and you have to know which vertex group is the main head group. And then just select it and click assign with a weight of 1. And now if I go to pose mode, the whole character will be working as expected. Okay, so this joining of the face rig is not the main FACEIT workflow. I just want to emphasize that. It's just a special feature that the add-on provides. It can be useful. So right now you can animate with both rigs. I can animate with this bone rig, and I can also go to the Shapekey rig, and it will also affect the mesh. So using both of these rigs can be confusing. So I would recommend using one or the other. So if in doubt, just skip this joining of the bone rig. It is not essential and it is not part of the main FACEIT workflow. And this is the end of the first FACEIT tutorial. You should be able to use the add-on now. But if there are any problems, let me know, because we are not done yet. There will be more videos in this series about FACEIT. And if you share any problems that you're having, I may be able to cover them in the following videos. So in the next one, we'll talk about combining FACEIT with existing characters and rigs, such as Rigify, AutoRig Pro, and so on. Then in a third video, we'll cover working with non-realistic or non-human characters, such as anime and cartoony stuff, animals, and so on. In the fourth video, we'll focus on creating the mocap performance and applying it on a character using FACEIT. And I also have an idea for an additional project-based chapter. Basically, I want to try to really push this technology as far as possible and create something cool. But I may need help from the community. It would be awesome to have someone with actual acting experience who can record a performance for us that we can then apply to a CG character. So if somebody out there wants to help with their acting skills, let me know and I'd really appreciate it. And then of course, at the end, we can share the whole project and all of the challenges that we faced and the solutions that we found. So it will be a project by the community for the community, and I think it could be really cool.